The 𝒲𝓉𝓉𝓄𝒃 people were the first settlers in the Caribbean, peaking in around 5000 to 200 BCE. It is believed that they came from the Orinoco Valley in South America, then came to the Antilles from Trinidad and Tobago to Boricuas. 𝒲𝓉𝓉 comes from the word 𝒲𝓉𝓉, a shell-midden site in Trinidad. The Tainos are a subgroup of Arawakan, or descendants of 𝒲𝓉𝓉s, from the northeastern South America, inhabited the Greater Antilles, the local government under the Taino amulet. Taino means noble. The Tainos named the island Boricuas, which roughly translate to the great land of the valiant and noble lord. Some translations say it just means noble, which is what the word Taino means, but the meaning of the word is still the same. The island in which they inhabited was treated with great reverence and respect. Tainos lived across the Caribbean, in Cuba, Jamaica, and the Dominican Republic. Those from Puerto Rico, Borinquen, were called Boricuas, and still to this day, Puerto Ricans will often refer to themselves as Boricua. They had an agrarian lifestyle, but mostly lived on shores as fishers. They made art, had their own religion, and dabbled in cosmetics. They were considered the most advanced of the Arawakan. The Tainos believed in spirits and deities. These were called 𝒮𝓹. The word refers to the spiritual force as well as sculptures used to please them. Each social group could pick a 𝒮𝓹, and often had rivalries because of them. As documented by the Spaniards, they worshipped a creator god, whose name I'm about to butcher, but 𝒂𝓁𝓗𝓁. 𝒂𝓁𝓗𝓁? Something like that. Who governs the growth of the staple food, the cassava. Yucca is where we get the Spanish word yucca for cassava. 𝒂𝓁𝓗, or this male fertility god, had his femme counterpart, 𝒴𝓃𝓃𝓃, also many different names for both of these gods. So many, I couldn't list them all. But 𝒴𝓃𝓃 governs rivers, waters, and seas. Lesser deities, the 𝒮𝓹, controlled lesser things, like the rainfall in the case of 𝒴𝓊𝓁𝓁, the rain giver. Tainos consulted them for medicine and healing, and treated them with respect and honor, especially since depending on their social standing before death. So if it was a high-ranking person, you'd treat their 𝒮𝓹 with more respect. During healing consultation, images of 𝒮𝓹 would be painted on or tattooed onto priests called bohutis or buhuthuis. They created mass sculptures, dujos being ritual seatings for chiefs or caciques to display their power over the spiritual world, dances and celebrations like arietos, songs and dances to worship the gods led by a tequina or teacher, and beiti as sacred spaces, and celts or ceremonial blades. Using 𝒶𝓁𝓯, the ceremoniously ground seeds of the 𝒶𝓁𝓯 tree produced a hallucinogenic and psychedelic effect. They had a hereditary system that is thought to be matriarchal in a matriarchal society, meaning they traced ancestry through the female line, and their mother's name determined the rank of the person. They'd live with their maternal uncle when newly married, and chiefs succeeded by the sons of their sister, chosen lineage from their noble class, the Nitainos, the upper class of the Tainos. Not much is known about their gender roles, but from current evidence, it seems to be a non-exclusive society with female caciques or chiefs, and work being split equally rather by gender. Finally, they believed life began in a cave, and that humans came from caves, and when you died, you'd return to that cave. 𝒴𝓃𝓃 defines a prime matter and that all is tangible and or material and has several manifestations. One is aforementioned nurturing maternal figure. So 𝒂𝓗𝓯 is seen as a mother of the earth. Another is 𝒂𝓂𝓈, spirit of love. The last being 𝒂𝓁𝓁𝓁, the violent wild mother of volcanoes, storms, and earthquakes. Taino women pray to 𝒂𝓗𝓯 for safe childbirth. 𝒂𝓗𝓯 is said to have conceived 2 sons without intercourse, so just by herself. The best is known as 𝒢𝒶𝓁 because he's the principal Taino god who rules over the fertility of the 𝒢𝒶𝓁𝓁. She's married to Yaya and had her first child, Yael, who they later killed for trying to kill Yaya. Yaya placed Yael's bones in a calabash. Again, pronunciation's gonna be terrible. I'm so sorry, it's very hard to find correct pronunciation for these words on the internet. Which turned into fish. The fish filled the ocean when the calabash first broke. And that is the history of a quick bite into the Taino history before colonization. Christopher Columbus, or Cristobal Colon in Spanish, arrived in Borinquen in 1593. He then claimed the land for Spain. Colon was a famous Italian man who was sponsored by the King and Queen of Spain for his voyage. He intended to find a shorter path to India, but instead found Borinquen. And of course, the US. Love. Juan Ponce de Leon named this land Puerto Rico, or Rich Port, in August 1508, seeing potential for riches and gold. Even today, Spanish is the primary language of Puerto Rico, and Catholicism is the main religion practiced there. Jesus. Immediately, they laid siege on the Boricuas, enslaving them within 50 years for 400 years. The Conquistadores enslaved them, forcing them to dig mines to find gold. De Leon discovered San Juan Bay and named it, a nod to Catholicism, directly translating to St. John Bay. In the words of Tony Castanha, the principal Cacique, and this is a name I may butcher, Aguabana, the elder, who is well aware of Columbus's arms and exploits in Hispaniola, prepared to accommodate him on his arrival. In the beginning, the two leaders entered into a treaty of peace and friendship and alliance. So they were very respectful to one another to begin with. And then obviously, slavery, unfortunately. The populations of the Tainos dwindled to near extinction due to death, disease, and cruel enslavement. Due to this, African slaves were brought to Borinquen to replace them. The conquistadors wanted to, and this is very bad, but they wanted to have them mingle to create a more, air quotes, efficient worker. Air quotes, air quotes, air quotes. Disgustingly treating both races like livestock, as well as assaulting many Taino women and African women. This led to the current tri-racial nature of the Puerto Rican people being African, Taino, and European, mostly Spaniard. They also forced Chinese immigrants over for cheap labor. Ethnically, Puerto Ricans are a mixture of the Mediterranean, mostly Spanish, African, and Chinese, and whatever elements survived in what many historians consider to be the genocide of the Taino people. Even today, Puerto Rico has many Chinese restaurants. Puerto Rican Chinese food is kind of a staple over there. And China influenced Puerto Rican art, food, economy, and cuisine over there. It's a very, even if in the States some Puerto Rican will bring that flavor over, I recommend seeing if you have any near you. It's a very distinct flavor. But after being raided by the French on the coast and multiple insurrections against the Spanish by what was left of the Tainos, they decided San Juan should be fortified. Thus, in 1537, La Fortaleza was constructed. It was highly critiqued for its lack of protection of the mouth and the port, and only protected the new city of San Juan from the south. St. John, in English, not to be confused with Viejo San Juan or Nuevo San Juan. It was suspected that the attackers were already in San Juan Bay. The poor placement and the fear of the British and the Dutch privateers, in massive, ginormous air quotes, and you'll see why soon, why the Dutch are so prevalent, but this caused the creation of La Castillo San Felipe de Moro, more commonly known as El Morro, or El Castillo del Morro, in 1539. That's, when you look up, in Puerto Rico, it's a big tourist attraction. If you look it up, it's pretty big. And more on that later. In 1582, Captain General Diego Méndez de Valdés arrived in San Juan to govern the newly fortified military encampment. He made the Morro larger and created the 𝒮𝒃 battery, now Fort San Jerónimo del Boquerón. Mouthful. After this, Puerto Rico was attacked twice. Sir Francis Drake invaded San Juan, and from June 16 to August 27, 1598, British Sir George Clifford attacked and occupied San Juan. The Dutch failed. Francis Drake, not surprisingly, Drake lost, whoa. But the British were semi-successful. They took over the island for a few months and retreated due to the weather. Again, the British retreated the tropical island of Puerto Rico, that looks like this, because of the weather. Do what you will with that. The damage caused by the attacks led to a wood fort, San Juan de la Cruz, St. John of the Cross, on 𝒮𝓄elo Island at the mouth of the Bayamón River. Now picture this. The Dutch West India Company began selling slaves, knives, mirrors, cloths, and flour, all, normal things to sell together, in exchange for tobacco, sugar, dyewoods, and hides in Puerto Rico. In 1625, the Dutch attacked again under the guidance of really long Dutch name, okay? Last name Hendricks. I'm gonna do my best attempt to pronounce this first name. Ready? Baldwin? Sounds like Baldwin. Maybe it's Baldwin. He did this for a more secure hold of the trade on the island. The only soldiers in Puerto Rico at this point were not trained at all, rather volunteers and were citizens. The citizens fled, soldiers couldn't do much, and Hendricks still lost. So that's Puerto Rico 2, the Dutch 0, or specifically Dutch privateers. So in retaliation, Baldwin Hendricks decides he's going to ransack and rob nearby civilians' home with his glorified crew of pirates and burn San Juan to the ground before escaping with these normal people's goods because he knew fighting back would be futile. So he just robbed ordinary people's homes and then burned them down because he lost again. Anyways, a new fort just dropped. 1635, a new fort, El Castillo San Cristobal, began construction. By 1650, the entire city was surrounded by a wall connected to San Cristobal defending the east. During this time, el Hispano y Espulón or La Garita del Diablo, the Devil's Sentry Box, was made defending the north. Now, this has a particularly interesting history because it's said to be haunted. Maybe more on that later. A little while later, another fort, La Perla, or La Pearl, was added for more protection in the 1660s. The modern-day barrio of La Perla was built where this fort used to be. Also, during this time, the wooden San Juan de la Cruz fort was being updated to masonry. Now, 1765, Irish Field Marshal and Inspector General Alexander O'Reilly was brought to Puerto Rico to train the soldiers over the course of 45 days, and he overhauled the military system. With help from an architect, another Irish man, Colonel Thomas O'Daly, they spent 25 years building an in-depth defense system. Some notable changes were 𝒮𝓄𝓁 upgrades, the creation of San Cristobal and its upgrades, sanctions to the city walls, San Geronimo, El Canuelo, and the 𝒮𝓁, mix those up, 𝒮𝓁 sector. And 𝒮𝓁's current design was made by O'Daly, so some Irish help. 7 years later, General Ralph Abercrombie and Abercrombie and Admiral Sir Henry Harvey attacked San Juan and failed. After this, no more pushes upon San Juan occurred except for a very random and uncalled for pirate raid. Now enter the U.S. of A., the United States of America. In 1897, the Puerto Rican government tore down the Santiago Gate, Ravelin, and Bastion and parts of the San Cristobal, not San Juan, just San Cristobal, to expand the city outside of the walls. A year later, on May 12, 1898, the American Naval Fleet, commanded by Admiral T. Sampson, attacked San Juan. Then Nelson A. Miles entered Puerto Rico at Guanica and intended to rendezvous at San Juan. This marked the beginning of the Spanish-American War. Puerto Rico was bombed by the U.S. after finally gaining its independence after 400 years of European colonization. Spain lost the war and Puerto Rico was ceded to the U.S. on December 10, 1898, being ended by the Treaty of Paris, which also ceded over Guam and the Philippines to the U.S. as well. Then, Fort Brooke was established by the U.S. Army. 𝒮𝓁 and San Cristobal were transferred to the United States military, from the United States military to the Department of the Interior National Park Service between the years 1898 to 1949. In 1983, very recently, if you really think that's like 40-something years ago, the United Nations Education, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, UNESCO, identified La Fortaleza and the San Juan National Historic Site as UNESCO sites. The Foraker Act, April 12, 1900, enacted by the U.S. Congress to institute a civilian government in Puerto Rico. Up to this point, they were denied citizenship. Now, rapid-fire semi-modern history. Get ready. This is all based on the Smithsonian article, which I'll either link in the description or in the comments. This is quick, just like a quick summary of things that happened from this point on. The Jones Act in 1917 grants citizenship during World War I. It allowed Puerto Rican-born citizens born after or on April 25th, 1898, to move across the U.S. and qualified them for the draft. It also restructured the government and economy, and no voting in presidential elections or voting representation in Congress. Operation Bootstraps, 1947, was made to simulate the Puerto Rican economy. It attracted mainland U.S. businesses with cheap labor and tax, leading to urban development, but caused mass displacement in Puerto Rico. In 1952, it gained its status as a commonwealth and a constitution. In 1989, pushing for status referendum act, Puerto Rico's governor requested a vote to determine the island's status, which did not happen. In 2015, there was a debt crisis, and the economic model led to a public debt of more than $70 billion. PROMESA in 2016, Puerto Rican Oversight, Management, and Economy Stability Act, which put together stands for is what PROMESA stands for, which means promise in Spanish. This implemented a plan to manage this debt. It appointed a seven-member financial oversight board that controls the budget. Members are from the U.S. mainland. Puerto Rican people see public education, health, and essential service budgets cut with little effort to address the corrupted spending. Another thing to note is Puerto Rico has had many corrupt governors because most of these governors are elected by the U.S. president. More on that later. 2017, Hurricane Maria, a Category 4, devastated Puerto Rico and left the island without access to essential services for months. The government was unprepared and unable to help, and trauma from this hurricane remains to this day. In summer of 2019, Governor Ricardo Rossello and other Commonwealth officials had chat logs leaked and made vulgar remarks. People protested and he resigned. In a minute, I'm going to read some of those messages and translate them. In 2020, earthquakes occurred. On Three Kings Day, southwest Puerto Rico had earthquakes damaging 8,300 homes, many struggling with housing loss, but the community came together for help. COVID-19 hit especially hard because they had still not healed from Maria entirely. Hurricane Fiona 2022 brought rainfall, flooding, and landslides, but Puerto Rico bounced back quickly after being prepared for hurricanes as a commonwealth. Now, Puerto Rico, many trials and tribulations. Many call this scandal by Ricardo Rossello WikiLeaks. These messages were sent from December 2018 to January 2019. Now, I'm taking this from a CNN article, but Rossello apologized for them, for these chat logs, in which he called Melissa Mark Vireto, a Puerto Rican-born former speaker of the New York City Council, a very unkind word for a female night worker. Our people should come out and defend Tom and beat that blank, he had wrote. She responded, a person who uses language against a woman, whether a public figure or not, should not govern Puerto Rico. This type of behavior is completely unacceptable. Him and some other members of the board, Christian Sobrino Vega, who was Puerto Rico's chief fiscal officer at the time, and his representative, expressed frustration at Carmen Yulin Cruz, San Juan's mayor. I am salivating to shoot her, he wrote. You'd be doing me a grand favor, the governor responded. At one point, the governor writes that Cruz must be off her meds for deciding to run against him. Either that, or she's a tremendous HP, which is Puerto Rican, or a Spanish acronym for son/daughter of a female word for dog. She belonged to the opposition party. Later, they made vulgar comments, Sobrino Vega, to Puerto Rican star Ricky Martin. Nothing says patriarchal oppression like Ricky Martin, he wrote. He's a lot of unkind words towards Mickey Martin and his sexuality. And it's just a lot. He joked about the growing piles of deceased individuals after Hurricane Maria. Now that we're on the subject, don't we have cadavers to feed our crows? Clearly they need attention. Whoa! Just clearly an awful guy placed in charge. At this point, it was unknown about these things, but overall, just what a guy. What a bad guy. He later resigned and apologized and said that, I believe he said that, I will continue my work and responsibility to the people of Puerto Rico. And then he resigned. There are those examples of the worst that I found. There are others, if you'd like to go look that up. Now, what else happened in the U.S.? Obviously, I didn't touch on everything, so here are some things I'd like to just point out. Good morning, USA. Some other important events that happened were from 1898 to 1946, Puerto Rico was governed by governors appointed by the U.S. president, and laws passed down by legislator that could be vetoed by the president. The Korean War, Puerto Ricans were the 65th Infantry Division, called the Boricuas, which I personally find so charming of a name. It makes me smile every time I hear it. That's such, I don't want to say cute, because they did incredible things to serve our country. They were awesome. So awesome that the Boricuas earned 10 Distinguished Service Cross Awards, 356 Silver Stars, and 596 Bronze Stars. In 2019, there are about 3,300,000 veterans and 35,000 active duty Puerto Ricans, both in the island and on the mainland of the U.S. 9 Puerto Ricans have been awarded the Medal of Honor, 7 the Navy Cross, and 18 the Distinguished Service Cross. Truman, in 1946, appointed the first governor of Puerto Rico that was Puerto Rican, Jesus T. Piñero. In 1948, Congress passed the Elective Governor Act, and its first democratically elected governor, Luis Munoz Marin, assumed office in 1948, as the Hispanic Federation reports. In 1948, Law 53, which is called the Gag Law, was signed by Piñero. It banned owning or displaying a Puerto Rican flag anywhere, even in your own house. It became a crime to speak out against the U.S. or favor Puerto Rican independence. Anyone accused and found guilty of this could face 10 years of prison, a fine of $10,000 or both. After many revolts, most armed and coordinated, it was repealed in 1957. This is why it's often joked about or pointed out that a lot of Puerto Ricans have a lot of Puerto Rican flag memorabilia. It's because the flag wasn't allowed for a very long time. Puerto Ricans are very and have a lot of national pride. National being national technically would be the U.S., but a lot of pride for Puerto Rico because they, for quite a while, were not allowed to have that pride. I'll link all my sources, but for a good quick bite and more information into the modern history, check out Puerto Rican History 101 by the Hispanic Federation. They go into some more things. They talk about some of the same things I talk about, but they go into more pop culture things or just quick fun facts you might want to know about. And overall, Puerto Rico has such a rich history and important culture that most people outside of the island don't really know about. It's such an amazing place, and I recommend doing a deeper dive with the sources I linked. I definitely didn't get everything, so if you're interested in it, I'll make sure to link those sources in the comments or the description. We'll see if I have enough room in the description. Probably in the comments, though. They'll probably be there. Some of the sources are very, very long. And just to name them, I used Adventures in Indigenous Caribbean Resistance, Survival, and the Continuity in Borinquen, Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico, 500 Years of Oppression. Puerto Rico History 101, A History of Puerto Rico. A Timeline of Puerto Rico. And I think this one's just Timeline. Let me see. Yeah, by Timeline of San Juan. Those are the sources. Again, those first two are like 40-50 pages. But they're so wonderful. I definitely recommend it. Thank you guys for watching. Stay tuned for another video essay. I've got some ideas that's a little bit different, but I'm trying to do things that interest me, because the more I like something, the more I want to do it, the more I want to learn about it, and the more I can report to you guys on. Leave a comment on your thoughts, what you think I should do next, what you think I'd be interested in. I'm interested in a lot of things, so trust me, if there's a long history, I want to know it. And please consider subscribing. It really helps my channel grow, and it's not, I really appreciate you guys. I saw how my last video popped off, and I was flabbergasted on my yassification. I may do a deeper dive on that in the future. I did get a lot of people asking me to do that, but right now, I just wanted to put this out here. Thank you guys for watching, for staying tuned, and bye-bye.